From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Library of Congress. I am Grant Harris. I am not Georgette Dorn. Georgette Dorn is announced in the program as being the person who would give the opening remarks, but she could not be here, so it's me. I am head of the European Reading Room. Together with the library's Poetry and Literature Center, we are delighted to welcome friends from the Embassy of Denmark. We're very pleased to have here Ms. Jette Renberg Elker. She is a cultural attaché. She's brought some of her colleagues with her from the Royal Embassy of Denmark. And we are especially pleased to have our special guest, the award-winning author Christian Jungersen, who will discuss his latest novel, You Disappear, translated by Misha Hoekstra and published in the U.S. last year. Mr. Jungersen has written 3 critically acclaimed, prize-winning bestsellers in Denmark, the last 2 of which have been translated into English at this date, and he has been published in more than 20 countries. I'll mention his latest 3 works. The oldest of these 3 in English would be entitled Undergrowth from 1999. It won the Best First Novel Award and a 3-year writing fellowship from the Danish Arts Foundation. Then in 2004, the Danish version, the original of what we would call The Exception in English, came out. It won 2 Danish major literary prizes and was shortlisted for major prizes in the United Kingdom, France, and Sweden. This book, The Exception, was later voted by readers of Denmark's largest newspaper, Jyllands-Posten, as the second best Danish novel of the previous 25 years. The book that we will be talking about today, You Disappear, came out in 2012 in Danish. It won the 2012 Literary Prize, decided by thousands of Danish library users. That prize, I hesitate to pronounce that, Lasernes Bogpris. Okay, good, thank you. Born and raised in the northern suburbs of Copenhagen, the author has lived in a number of different countries, including the island of Malta. His master's degree is in communication and sociology, and he has worked as a copywriter for an ad agency, as an information officer, a TV script consultant, and film teacher at Copenhagen Community College. Very briefly, let me just mention that the Library of Congress is proud of its approximately 80,000 titles from or about Denmark. We have an extensive collection of monographs on the subjects of Danes in the United States and Danish Americans. We currently receive each year approximately 600 volumes from or about Denmark. We are proud to have Mr. Jungersen's works among these works. The library is open to readers 6 days a week, so please come and visit us. The Poetry and Literature Center is a co-sponsor of this event. It fosters and enhances the public's appreciation of literature. The center administers the endowed poetry chair for the U.S. Poet Laureate and coordinates an annual literary season of poetry, fiction, and drama readings, performances, lectures, and symposia. The European Division, from where we come, the other co-sponsor, is responsible for providing reference and for developing the library's collections relating to continental Europe. We are going to have a reading by the author and time for questions and answers before the book signing. And we do have copies of the books right outside if you'd like to purchase a copy and have the author sign. We hope you have a pleasant time here today at the library. Thank We thank all of you who've made this event possible, from the embassy, the Danish embassy, and in the library and elsewhere. Please turn off your cell phones and recording devices for the duration of the program. And please be aware that we are recording this audio-visually from the back of the room. So this event will be later made available as a Library of Congress webcast. So I would ask you to help me welcome Mr. Jungersen.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm here to talk primarily about my latest book, You Disappear. It is a novel about a married couple. Everything seems to be going well. She's a teacher. He's a headmaster at a private school. And then he starts to change his personality. And in the beginning of the novel, it's found out that he has a brain tumor, gradually growing brain tumor. And this tumor is situated right here. A tumor can affect you in many different ways depending on where it's situated. Some people lose ability to speak, some people lose ability to learn new stuff, other people lose ability to remember stuff they haven't learned years ago. If a tumor is situated here and nowhere else, it will not affect all of these things. You can still run and walk, and you can still pass an IQ test as well as before, but typically you will change your personality. Very much so. You'll lose your inhibitions, you will lose your ability to empathize with others, and you will not have any awareness that you're ill yourself. No matter how many doctors you go to, you'll think you're the same person and everybody else is acting really strange. This is a tragedy for any family, not just for him, but for his wife, his parents, their son, teenage son, and that could have been a full book in itself. But You Disappear is a novel where things move at a brisk pace, and already at around page 70, it's discovered that before he had this diagnosis, he started to commit fraud against his own school. He had a gambling addiction on the stock exchange, and he committed fraud. This honorable man, this wonderful man, who'd been up at 6 o'clock in the morning for many, many years to help his school, to help the children, help the teachers, he's now brought it on the verge of bankruptcy. So the big question is, it's obvious in the beginning of the book, this is a completely different person. It's also obvious that some years ago, he was his real self. The fraud started a year before he was diagnosed, a year before anybody think about him being ill. So at what point in this gradual slide, imperceptible slide, can you say he's no longer himself? It was his brain that did it, not him. He should not go to prison because it was his illness, not his own free will. This is a huge issue. And also because aren't we all our brains? I mean, what if he had been healthy? Wouldn't it have been his brain who led him to it? These are big issues, and he himself at this point, at the start of the book, doesn't really care. But Mia, his wife, of course she wants to save her husband. And she wants to save her son from growing up with a convicted criminal, and she really has to engage with the court case. And in order to do that, she needs to apply herself 100% to figure out what neurology is, what brain science is, and also a lot about the history of free will, the history of philosophy. Do we have a free will or not? I'm not going to tell you much more about the story. Maybe I should just say one thing, though. If she really wants to fight for her marriage, she needs to be in a very, very close collaboration with the lawyer taking on the case. And that is a very handsome and healthy lawyer. That's all. I will read from the very beginning of the book, and nobody knows anything about Frederick being ill or anything here. We whoosh down between dark rock faces. through hairpin turns, down and around past dry scrub, silver-pale trees and back up. Then over a ridge where the car nearly leaves ground and Nicholas and I whoop as our entrails become weightless. The hot Mediterranean air buffets our faces, for all 4 windows are open. Frederick takes a curve so fast that I grab my headrest. The sea beneath us keeps switching left and right. Normally Frederick's never brave behind the wheel, so I try not to be afraid. And the heat makes the rocks steeper, darker, the lemon grows prickling even more tartly in my nose, the sea shining blue like I've never seen it before. Around, yet another rock outcrop, and suddenly we're engulfed by cyclists. I scream. A swamp of neon-pink cycling jerseys. I look out the back window, no one's fallen, but they've dismounted from their bikes. Clenched fists, open mouths. We round the next curve. Frederick, it's not funny anymore. He doesn't answer. Frederick! He lets out a small sigh and maintains his speed. I observe his long, slender fingers wrapped around the wheel. They don't belong to this way of driving. Once I found them erotic, like miniature versions of his body, tall and thin, a swaying, relaxed body, not a speed demon's. And is it this speed that makes his eyes look deeper? Black, violet massives. He seems strange, though I can't say where the difference lies. Another hard bump, and again all 3 of us rise into the air. Stop, Frederick, stop, I yell. Nicholas has had his head out the window. Now he pulls it back in. Mom, just leave off. I'm supposed to leave off. I'm supposed to leave off. Your father's driving like a complete madman. He'll kill us. Is that what you want? It's the speed, the colors, the heat, and all the outrageous Mallorcan beauty. Nicholas sighs with precisely the same sibilance as his father and again leans his head out the window. Nicholas, keep your head inside. It's dangerous. He acts as if he doesn't hear me. Keep your head in, I say. It's dangerous. Still he doesn't. I don't care if he's 16 now. I turn around and pull him in myself. I use some force and he stays in his seat. The Mediterranean shines so brightly it's impossible to look at it straight on. It floats up through the terrain and calls us like the tunnel of light, the dying sea. Come, become one with my beauty and eternity. A nudge to Frederick's hand and we'd swerve over the berm and all become weightless again, and then we'd be lifted out of the landscape too. I want to say stop, stop again. Instead I look at our son. He's having fun. Am I just a killjoy? An oncoming driver lays on his horn. Frederick keeps his eyes fixed on the road before us. They drive like total madmen down here, he says. Will you please drive more slowly? I ask again. Nicholas and Frederick laugh. The road twists, and then we're back in shadow and close to the rock wall. An oncoming truck suddenly fills the space in front of us. Frederick swings our car up against the rock face. Granite grates against the panels with a sound like we've been tossed in a metal grinder. And then we're past. Frederick says, we took out full coverage. The rental agency will cover it all. He doesn't slow down. Now Nicholas pulls on the back of Frederick's seat. Dad, stop, stop. And I join in, stop the car now. But he doesn't lift his gaze from the road. He sighs like before. I pull back on the handbrake as we drive. He laughs and releases it again. Frederick, look at me. Won't you at least do that? He keeps looking straight ahead as he speaks. And as always, his voice projects reason and calm. I need to keep my eyes on the road. Frederick turns off sharply onto one of the small gravel roads. Low, dry stone walls on either side, and we skid in the gravel and scream, strike a stone wall, are flung to the other side of the road, hit that wall too, skid, stop. I turn toward Nicholas. I want to be beside him in the back seat, clutch his head to my breast to protect him. But the car's already come to rest, it's too late. Are you okay, I ask? But I know he hasn't been hurt. It was only a couple of minor collisions. We're extremely lucky. I close my eyes for a moment and exhale. My pulse is throbbing in my temples. Are you okay? I repeat. Yeah, how about you? I think so. I look through the windshield. Frederick is already out front. He kicks the car with a resentful expression, squats to examine something by one of the fenders. I yell, aren't you even going to see if we're all right? He doesn't answer. Don't you even care? Well, I can see you're doing fine, he answers. I jump out of the car, and for the first time in our 20 years together, I hit him so hard that it's not just a game. He falls to the gravel and I shout, "What the hell? What the fucking hell? Have you gone stark raving mad?" Sweat drips off of me and my fists are clenched, my pulse still pounding in my temples. He gets up, staggering but unconcerned, as if he hasn't noticed my blow, and takes a few steps. "I don't think I can get it to run," he says. "That's a stroke of luck, you big idiot. Maybe we won't die today after all." "Mom," Nicholas's voice calls from inside the car. I breathe deeply several times. For my son's sake, I need to be the reasonable one here. And so I manage to pull myself together. "What should we do?" I ask in a somewhat calm voice. Frederick doesn't answer. He climbs up on the stone wall and stands there, surveying the landscape. That's the beginning.
That's just such a gripping beginning, isn't it? Can everybody hear me? Yeah. It just, as I said earlier, it has everything, and it has drama, it has humor even. It's a horrible situation, but I heard a lot of other people laughing, so I wasn't the only one that thought there was some humor there. And also, it's set in a very exotic locale for Scandinavians. So
Everything sunny is exotic for us, I'd say.
So when I told people that I was going to be reading your books, they warned me. I was warned about your books. They said, set aside a good amount of time because you will not be able to move until you finish them. And I think you had a good quote earlier about how you write. I mean, you're a very deliberate author.
Well, we did an audio recording earlier in the day, and I talked about, I had heard some French guy say, in order to be a French intellectual, say, in order to be a good writer, you need to be half a madman, half a brilliant editor. And you need to swap between these two. And it is difficult. And I don't know, we could debate which I'm the best at, but yeah.
I think you're good at everything. I mean, his books kind of grip you on a philosophical level and on an emotional level. And they're just page turners. So what kind of a genre would you say you
Well,
were
this
in?
is a family drama. This is very down to earth. This is something that could happen to all of us. And to me, honestly, I think it's the most horrible thing I can imagine. Having my loved one, my spouse, changing personality completely. As Mia says, at some point, it feels like there's a burglar in her house who has not just entered the house, but actually entered her husband's body, and still everybody expects from her that she should sort of support him for decades to come, and she should share a double bed with him, but it's a different person. How can anything be worse than that? That's a tragedy. Then there's also the grotesque elements. There'll be scenes here and there that are just outrageous and I hope funny, but you laughed. And then, of course, there are the huge philosophical elements, like what is a person? And these are elements actually that are changing so much in this day and age. We're getting to know more and more about the brain, and that will obviously affect what we think of a different person, what we think of ourselves, who are we? And this is, I suppose, one of the things that I wanted to write here. Like, in this building and many other buildings, there are so many books. And all writers will have to ask themselves, why would I want to write a book? Doesn't the world really have enough? So we all want to write something that is, you might say, experimental. I mean, this genre is not labeled experimental, but it is. We all writers feel our own books are experiments. Can this work? And for me, what I wanted was to explore this new world that we're about to enter, a world where we will know more, all of us, about the brain. And it will change us. There's no doubt it will change us. I don't know. I feel like I've entered a very, very long answer. Would you like me to? Because I can go on for this for hours.
Yes, no, I'm from Bruce Spiegel.
Can I just say? Okay, I'll say a few more things. So, in the Renaissance, 600 years ago, before that, the brightest people on Earth would say that the world is created out of 4 elements. The I don't know how to translate Earth in
Fire.
Earth, fire, air, and water. So yeah, I didn't know it's earth or soil in English, but anyway. And that was not sort of drunken bar talk. That was the most brilliant minds of the day. Then they start to not invent, but develop the technique of telescopes and microscopes, and they start to figure out this is not the way it is at all. They're not out. This is not going to make a sort of a small modification. They're not going to figure out, oh, it's clay and oil and water and ha ha ha. No, this is a huge change, a huge change. So right now, right as we speak, we have something similar going on to that back then in the Renaissance, where we're starting to figure out, to see what it looks like when people make a choice, see what it looks like when they're in love, when they're angry, when they can empathize with someone else, when they can't. Is this going to change our world completely? Absolutely. So I've thought, if I want to write a book that is new, that is fresh, that's different, that is a literary experiment in my own way of doing it, this would be a good thing to explore, because it hasn't really been described much before, because it's so new.
Wow. So, do you have a position on free will at this point?
Well, this is something that the most brilliant philosophers of the world has been debated for more than 2,000 years. So I'm very happy today in March in Washington to be able to now say that I've reached a conclusion. No.
You're here, folks.
This is going to be a memorable day. I actually do have my own position on it. I think I'm going to take, I'm sorry about these very long answers, but I think I'm going to take this answer in a bit of a different way. So when people ask me, when you read this book, it will present different positions. It'll present different ways. It's a novel. There'll be different people have all different attitudes toward free will, all different attitudes toward neurology and their own lives and other people's lives. So you'll go away with it with a universe of positions, and they all are interacting, and they all communicate with each other. If I, as the author, come and say, this is my own position, to many people, I think, actually the book will be more boring afterwards. And this is interesting. This is not just a way of avoiding your question. It's a way of taking your question in a different direction, because it says something about what a novel is. It says something about that, why on earth will I spend years? I spent almost 5 years writing this book. Why would I do it? Well, I would do it because in writing a novel, I can create an approach to this subject that is basically more intriguing, more rich than any conversation between the two of us. This has nothing to do with you, nothing to do with me. It's simply that if that was not the case, this would have been a bad book. So that's why you try to. That's what can sort of be your impulse to writing, to have this richness to what you express that just has to be better than any conversation.
Right. So that was the
the
philosophical part of the book that's so engaging. Then it's the characters.
Mm-hmm.
How do you really imagine yourself into these lives? I mean, if I had known, I might have thought the author was a woman, because it's from a woman's point of view.
Thank you.
That's a compliment.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I mentioned that I spent almost 5 years writing this book, and a lot of that is research. To me, research is not just getting the facts right. It's more like, I don't know, you have this in acting called the method acting, where you sort of immerse yourself in a universe and then make it yours. And that's what I'm doing here. I've been so much in hospital wards, meeting people who are brain damaged, people who are married to people with brain damage, neurologists and surgeons, and also school teachers and headmasters, and been hanging out with them and going to dinners and just made it my world. So in order to that this book should not just be a thriller or a comedy where you apply some facts, but that the book come out of the facts, that it becomes my universe. And this is one reason why it takes me so long to write any book. I've spent more than 3 years on each of my books. It is that the first 2 years, even though I'm writing hundreds of pages, I can just see the characters are not right, the characters that you talked about. And it takes time to get into them, get into that universe, and you need to really absorb their world in a way that's not just intellectual, but is emotional, to be inside of them. My ideal would be that if I woke up from a dream at night, my dream could be perhaps applied to my protagonist, my lead character. So that takes time to get that close to another person, and it's very important to me.
Yeah, you've done a great job.
And that's also something I mentioned about the research, all these things I've done with the research. Like, there's no end to that. I was actually thrown out of a supermarket in Denmark because they thought I was an industrial spy. For instance, just like I walk around with a camera, because I have some scenes where I have Mia is having eye contact with a neighbor, and he's standing by the olives, and she's standing by the milk, and is that possible? And I just walk, I film the whole supermarket in order to be at my desk and see what can I do with the angles here to get it right. And they think, of course, I'm a spy for a competing chain or something. But this is very typical of my approach. And also, well, for instance, Frederick is commits fraud. So of course I talk to lawyers, I talk to police people, I talk to accountants, but I need to talk to major big-time fraud people also, people who have been convicted of fraud. So I thought, what can I do here? And I called the Danish Association of People with Ludomania, gambling addiction. And I said, do you have anybody who I could talk to? And yeah, no problem. And then I said, well, can you give him my number and he'll call me? Well, the problem is he's in jail, of course. What do you think? Oh, yeah. So there was then sort of in the hallway in the jail, he had half an hour of lunchtime where I could call him every day at 12. And I did that 3 days. And of course, his feeling of, I'll get a little music.
Sorry.
We get a little accompaniment. Of course, his explanation of what happened is completely different from what the police says. Of course, yeah. What does it feel like to be arrested? What does it feel like to be arrested for big-time fraud? It's like if you ask, what does it feel like to have something done to your teeth? If you ask the dentist or the patient, it's a very different explanation. And I, as the writer, needs to know both. So yeah, I do that with all these characters, and I really make an effort with that.
Well, it shows, right?
Thank you.
Okay, so before we turn this over to the audience, I have one more question. When I was reading your books, I got this sense of a very peaceful, organized, orderly society, a Danish society, and the subtext is very different, I think, from what you might find in an American novelist. So do you see yourself as a particularly Danish author?
I think I do, actually. I suppose I love being in America, but you do feel an anger. You walk down the street. When you're a foreigner, come from Northern Europe, and you walk down the street, a lot of people seem to be very angry. A lot of people are shouting. A lot of people seem to be mad. And that's a difference. That doesn't have to be that. It's not like that in every society in the world. I mean, this is a very, very fertile, wonderful place. So many wonderful things have come out of it. But it does change literature. I think if you are in a society where things are a bit more peaceful, where people don't have to fight so much for survival, just even if you fail at everything, you will still be kind of supported for life. It's like that makes a change. And if you make a ton of money, you could buy a bigger yacht, or you could buy a bigger house, but it's not like everybody will suck up to you because they don't have anything. So everything changes the whole vibe. Still we're people, still there's misery, still there's fighting, still having a spouse turning ill is absolutely horrible. But I think that book out of Denmark, at least my books, will also be a portrayal of a slightly different way of making things work in a society.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now I'll open the floor up for questions. Here.
First of all, I want to congratulate you on your fluency and your competency with English.
Thank
And
you.
I hope that your next book will perhaps be first written in English and then translated into Danish. Then I wanted to know if you could share the precipitation that entered your mind for the content of the book with the brain and the scientific element. And then it's obvious that you have visited schools and society in a great detailed way because your understanding and insight with relationships is so strong. So that goes
Thank you.
without saying. And then I also would like to know what your impression is of the translation of You Disappear.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your comments on my English language. I do have. I enjoy trying to become better, learning all the time. It's a fun process. I've been working very close with the translator Misha Högstra, who I find brilliant. And even though he is brilliant, they'll still be thinking he doesn't know because he is not Danish. So we have to sit both of us. Well, he writes it, and I scope through every single sentence and compare, and then we go back and forth and discuss what would be the best solution. And so I'm very happy with this translation, and it is difficult. It's very, very difficult to make a good translation, but I'm very happy with it. And I would never attempt to write a book in English as my first language. I mean, I do have a lot of fun trying to learn it, but no. How can I say? I'm often asked, what's the tricky part for a foreigner when you try to learn English? Well, the tricky part is that when you talk about something, you're not just talking about the subject, you're also kind of presenting yourself as a character. So if I say, this has been an amazing event, if I say, this event has been the bomb, if I say, this event has been awesome, if I say, this has been fabulous, all these words in the dictionary will read as exactly the same. For a foreigner, that's the same word, you can use one or another, but each of them, oh, it's marvelous. Each of them will create kind of a character talking that's somewhat different. While you're talking, you're talking about the subject, but you're also modeling yourself, creating yourself more or less consciously. And that is absolutely essential for writing a good book. And it's difficult for a foreigner to do, and I would not attempt. I know that would be a limitation. Then you asked also more than the language about how I got to start the book. I have an old schoolmate who is a psychiatrist. And so for the last 20 years, I've heard stories from her, what she does at work with the mentally ill people. And it's just puzzled me how very, very different her whole approach to what a person is from what I read in novels. And I thought there's a problem here. There's a problem in that I myself have learned about Freud and psychoanalysis, and everybody else in the humanities in Denmark have done the same. When we have this classical psychological approach to what a person is that will somehow more or less affect every writer who has a college degree and some psychology training or education. But the whole professional world handling people with different disorders or problems has gone a different place. So I want to explore, again, the experimental aspect. I want to write a page-turner, but I also want to write a novel that explores this whole new approach to what it is to be a person. That was what has started me off. And that is probably, as most writers and writing teachers especially will tell you, the worst possible way to start off a book. You need to start off with a great character. You need to start off with a story. You need to start off with something that you're personally, emotionally involved with. Starting off with something, an idea, something abstract, something you want to explore. most often leads to a real poor book, a really poor book. So what you have to do then, of course, is, as I mentioned before with you, is to have this idea and then start over, meeting people, learning people, getting this world to be my own within the next few years, and then sort of going back. So it's a huge process.
There was another question there.
I have a question. Have you? Oh, thank you. I have been looking at these series on television with Charlie Rose and Eric Kendall. He is a brain specialist with a Nobel Prize.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would think your novel would be an absolute gem for Charlie Rose. Have you heard of him? He does this.
I've heard of Charlie Rose, and I think most writers think their own book would be a gem for Charlie Rose. That's my impression.
But I'm saying that, not you. And I think because they have this series exploring the brain.
Yeah, I would love. Of course, I'd love to be there.
That would be something that
Yeah.
might be very interesting for him to find out. And maybe this being filmed, maybe they will look at the Library of Congress's webcast and call it.
I would love it. I would love it, of course.
Anyway, the second comment is that I loved your dialogue. I think for a translation to be able to have, to kind of translate that type of dialogue, I think is totally exciting. So thank you very much for your
Misha, my translator, has actually written all kinds of stuff himself. Of course, he's a Native American, but he's also been a creative writing teacher for years, and he's actually a professional writer. So he sort of reinvents it in English, and we go back and forth again and make sure everything's right. So yeah, I'm very thankful to have such a translator.
It's very good. Thank you.
Oh, here, a question.
I was just wondering how you found him.
Through a shared friend many years ago. Back then, he was. I will not say I discovered him, but back then he had not translated any novels. So I sort of by coincidence met him, and he did some back then emails and things for me that I needed to be in perfect English, and just thought he was amazing. And I think this is the guy I wanted to translate my novel, and I made the decision.
So I have a question about sort of a deeper level of the novel. Of course, the issue with the brain and who you are is the prime theme. But I found that reading it, I was thinking so much about the relationships between men and women, the differences.
Yeah.
And that's something we can all relate to. Incidentally, I actually gave the book to a friend of mine, and she couldn't read it because her husband apparently had exactly the same. She had to stop in the middle of the book because it was just too personal for her. But for me, I was really spending a lot of time thinking about, what happened to Mia in the book, because she changes.
Yeah.
And she comes to a point where she falls in love with the lawyer. The thing is, she can't get back to where she was at the beginning of the book.
No, that's true.
And I thought that was amazingly interesting, because how many y'all experienced, being in love and being a different person.
So, well, the whole issue of writing with a female perspective is interesting. I don't really know where to start and begin there, and also the issue of how I portray men and women.
So was
Bef-
that
the-
a
the-
primary inspiration?
The book before this one is called The Exception. That's a book about 4 women working in a small office together, making life utter hell for each other. When I had the idea to write this novel, I told a good friend of mine who is a Danish female author about it, and I just started out. And she said to me, "Christian, I'm really, really sorry to say this to you, but I feel like it's my obligation as your friend. This book you cannot write." And the reason is that we women, we can feel so many things at the same time. We can think so many things at the same time. Whereas, to be honest, everybody knows men can only feel one thing at a time. And I thought, of course, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to write this book. Impossible challenges have always sort of been, I cannot resist. But also I thought, I'm going to utilize this. I'm not going to sort of defeat it with force. I'm going to make a judo throw with it. I'm going to use it to my advantage. So I tried to create a novel that not just were about these four women, but also sort of had a woman's perspective on the universe. And on full purpose, I created a world where the four females in this office, they are so complicated, like they're sort of bordering on falling apart as persons, whereas all the men are absolutely one-dimensional. And nobody really commented on it or noticed, so it worked very well for me. I did also, of course, a number of other thoughts about what is the relation between men and women with that book, and I could bring that into this one also, where I also have a lot of things to say about the whole issue there. So, for instance, Frederick, through the book, gradually improves, his health improves and improves, gradually, more and more. Nobody will know how healthy it'll actually be in the end, but he starts out with the operation and he's a completely different person. And then chapter by chapter his personality changes, which of course is a wonderful challenge for me as a writer, to have this gradual change of personality all the way through a book. But at some point, Mia is inviting her best friend for dinner and the best friend's husband. So Frederick at this point is a bit more simple than he used to be. So Mia's best friend Helen comes to dinner with her husband, and her husband is a builder, a sort of a contractor. He's doing projects. Whenever he is around, he comes with sort of filthy jokes. He drinks a bit too much. He interrupts everybody. He talks too much. And normally, when this couple has left, it's always been like that, Mia and Frederick will go, oh my God, how can she handle him? He's so primitive. And now this time, they come for dinner, and Frederick and this guy, they just bond immediately. They're having a brilliant time. And Henning, the man, the husband there, he's never felt this good in his life at this house. He's always felt he was looked down upon with his brand of humor and his ways, and his way of sort of everybody shout and talk. And so he feels, I'm having a great time here. And Frederick is having a brilliant time, and Mia's just sitting there and looking at her husband, who's just been so reduced from what this refined being that he used to be. And then her best friend says to her, how wonderful to see Frederick is healthy again. And what can you really say in that situation? It is also, we've talked about the tragedy and comedy being intertwined before, but also that I'm not quite sure with this book, am I ridiculing women looking down upon men as a bit more simple than women in general, or am I actually portraying men as being more simple? I don't know exactly what's happening there, but there's definitely some thoughts about the whole complicated issues of what are we alike. Of course, I know we're all different. Every woman are different, all men are different, but still, the overall picture. Was that an answer you?
Yes, I also wondered how much was that a consideration when you were writing the book to include those aspects?
Yeah, how much is it a consideration when I was writing the book? It was a huge consideration when I wrote The Exception. When I wanted to write a book about office intrigues and office politics, I could have chosen to have a gender mixed office, and then, interestingly enough, if I had exactly the same story, people would sort of think there were love interest and sexual desires and stuff. So I just chose it should be a one gender office. I could have chosen it to be a man or a women's office, and I chose it to be women. And then, of course, I had to do all these portrayals of not just women are like that, but four different women, four different ways of being a woman. And also, again, they need to change all through the book. not just for women, they're like that, but for every chapter they need to change in a way so that the reader doesn't think, oh, Eben would never do that. But on the other hand, also, they don't think that they're the same when the book is ended. So I have 4 different ways of living life as a woman intertwining. That was a huge challenge and something I really had to think about. But now with this one, it's just, it's not so much a consideration as with the previous book, I think. But I have many stories about my research, about my thoughts. I don't know, I could go on, but we have other, yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe time for one more question. I wanted to know if you were working on something else that we can look forward to.
I am. I don't know if you can look forward to it though, but I am working on something else, and we'll have to see. I don't really talk about what I'm working on, but I am immersed in something else, and I'm intrigued myself.
Good. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.